Please pray with me. Creator God, bring me your word tonight, that those listening would hear you and not me. Amen. So, the theme at the moment is doing things differently, and tonight specifically service. So doing service differently. Let's start, as usual, with what the word means. As usual, I'll give you the first definition that came up when I went to dictionary.com, which is an act of helpful activity. So service is something we do to be helpful to others. So holding a door open for someone, reaching a tin or a packet in a supermarket for someone that can't quite reach. For the drivers among us, letting someone pull out in front of us. Or again at the supermarket, letting the person behind us who has one loaf of bread go in front of us when our month's worth of shopping is on the conveyor belt falling off. These are all acts of service. And they're all acts of service which I think most of us have probably done at one time or another. From the reading tonight, verse 11 says, "If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ." So when we do those things, when we hold that door open, when we let another driver in front of us, we should do it in love. We should do it consciously in God's spirit, in God's strength. And then, when we're doing it, we are praising God. Now, I want to look at a couple of other passages from the Bible tonight, both of which I think you'll be familiar with. Mark chapter 12, verses 28 to 31 says, "One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked of him, of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." And then Matthew chapter 25, verses 34 to 40 says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my parent. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was ill, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison and go and visit you?' The king replied, 'Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me.'" Now, a few years ago, my partner Wendy and I read a book called The 5 Love Languages. It's an excellent book. It's by a guy called Gary Chapman, and I would highly recommend it. There are lots of different versions now. There's the 5 Love Languages of teenagers, 5 Love Languages of God, but the original, the 5 Love Languages, was specifically aimed at couples in the book, at men and their wives. That's how it is in the book, but everything within the book is very applicable to all of our relationships, not just our sexual partners, not just our parents, not just our kids, but everything in the book you can take and help it define your relationships. It can help you define how you love one another. It talks about how we feel loved by others and how we show love to others. Subconsciously, a lot of the time. The 5 love languages that he speaks of are words of affirmation, so when we positively assert someone, when we compliment them, when we build them up with the words that we say. Quality time, when we make time to be with someone, or just make the most of the time that we have with them. Gifts. When we give presents to someone, not necessarily anything big, a flower from the garden, but gifts. Physical touch. And like I said, this doesn't have to be in the sexual way that we have with our partners, but a hug, a touch, a hand on an arm, touch. And the fifth one, acts of service, where we do something helpful for someone. Once we had read this book, we shared our love languages with each other, and those of you who know Wendy will probably not be surprised that her main love language is acts of service. So through that book, I came to understand that when I came home from work in the evening and the housework was done and there was dinner on the table, that was a way in which Wendy was subconsciously saying to me, I love you. And then once I understood that, I understood that if I did the hoovering, or if I cleaned the toilet, or some such thing, it was my way of showing her that I loved her and how she felt loved. Now, I don't really do gardens, but Wendy loves our garden. I just don't get it, though. I once read the definition of a weed is an unwanted plant. Therefore, to me, most of what's growing in the garden is a weed. However, I remember one day Wendy had gone out. I spent about 3 hours in the garden, cutting the lawn, jet washing the patio, weeding, but only the plants that Wendy thought were weeds, sweeping, cleaning, tidying. Now, when I stood back and looked at it, I thought, wow, it doesn't look like I've done anything. That's me. That's the garden. It still had plants. It still had grass. Wendy walked in the back gate and she burst into tears because she saw the amount of work that I put in and understood that I did that because I loved her. I certainly did not do it for the garden. At this point as well, I'd like to thank SJ and Andrew. Over the last few weeks, I haven't been well. I haven't been able to make it here. I've had jobs, I've had responsibilities that I should have been doing up here. But as acts of service and acts of love for me, for you, for the church, for God, they have stepped up. Unquestioningly, they have stepped up and they have done what I have been unable to do over the last few weeks. Thank you. But what about doing service differently? Let's face it, it is a lot easier to do things for people we love and know, or when we enjoy doing what we're doing to serve someone. When Wendy says to me, darling, the garden needs watering, it doesn't matter how tired I am, I still want to go and water the garden for her. When a friend comes to me and needs a sounding board, that's easy. I love my friends. I love listening to people talk. When someone here asks me to pray for them, again, no problem. So acts of service are a way of showing people that we love them. But what about what I read from Mark earlier? Jesus commanded us to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. And our neighbour could be anyone. In fact, our neighbour is everyone. It's the person in the property living next door to you. It's the person sitting opposite you on the train. It's the person cold calling you just as you were serving the dinner to try and get you to change your electricity provider. It's the person living on the streets shivering and hungry. And then in Matthew, it talks about us feeding the hungry, clothing those who need clothes, those taking in the homeless, visiting those in prison. Now, I'm not saying that in this day and age, we should go out tonight from here, go and find a homeless person and put them in our spare room. That's not what I'm saying. But there are national charities like Shelter who help people on the streets year round. And locally here we have helped one church with their shelter over the winter. I'm not saying that we should make a big casserole and take it down the seafront and offer it to anyone who seems hungry. But there are other ways to help hungry people. Again, here we have helped people eat through our volunteering at Lunch Positive. I'm not saying that we pick the name of a criminal and we try and get ourselves onto their visitors list, but there are many charities set up to enable people to become pen pals with people in prison. There is a charity I know of called Lifelines, who match people with men and women on death row in America for them to become their pen pals. Jesus says, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was ill and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." And the reading tonight said, "If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ." I think maybe doing service differently for us is about doing these things and remembering that we love those that we're doing these things for, and that in every helpful act we perform, we're praising God. Amen.